drop a
Perfect.
GIF before we begin.
So let me first give a congratulations to everybody on the directors team for pulling this one out of the fire in the 11th hour. Foundation getting struck off was looking to be a very big problematic issue for our group as a whole. And the reason for that is I can harken back to the conversations I was having with New Future in the DAO forums, but it basically comes down to this: liability protection from both a tax auditing standpoint and a legal lawsuit standpoint. The DAO as an entity is what's considered a member-managed organization. And what that means is that the owners are making the executive decisions. So in the case of any kind of legal liability, that means every single one of us who has ever cast a vote in a DAO decision that has passed are liable for what happens, both upside and downside. And so having the foundation in place not only protects all of us individually, but it also protects our sizable treasury from getting drained in a lawsuit. And it doesn't have to be a losing lawsuit. It just has to be somebody with a big enough bag to keep us tied up in rotation until our treasury is drained. So once again, I would like to congratulate the directors for getting this one taken care of in double time. So that loops us back.
MVP No Future did a great job interfacing with the CorpSec and the previous CorpSec as well, just making that happen.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you all the way around. So that segues into the next topic. We have this interesting disconnect in the DAO between the multi-sig signers and the executive directors of the DAO, because our official vote was to give our directors trustee position over the treasury, but we didn't vote to give them executive control of the foundation. That was an unintended side effect. And so now that we have that set up, the question is, how are we going to compensate these guys for covering our asses? And that's really what this comes down to. So as a member-managed organization, if we want to take that liability off of our shoulders individually, it needs to be put on the DAO foundation, and we all need to hide behind that corporate veil in everything that we do. By putting the directors out there in the front on the paperwork, we are naming them as the executive decision-making team for our legal entity, which means they are a liability moat between the users and the outside world. That's what keeps our anonymity, and that's what keeps our liability protection individually. So we are asking these gentlemen for a huge lift, to be honest with you, because they're standing out front as our vanguard, protecting all of us from incoming liabilities. And for that kind of responsibility, they absolutely need to be compensated for that by the DAO. This isn't just what we would call a paid or salaried position. These dudes are covering our asses. So the two pieces that I'm seeing here are, one is compensation for the people that are keeping the liability at bay from us, and two is that within the foundation as executive directors, these gents need to have the autonomy to be able to make the decisions to keep the legal entity in compliance, up and running, without having to call for a vote every time they need to have money coming in for that. And so the way that would typically work in any IRL business outside of crypto is they would write up an annual budget for what they need to spend on compliance, taxes, legal fees, and the like. The DAO would vote to approve that, and then the directors have absolute discretion over those funds within the realm of keeping the entity functional. So if there are any questions, go ahead and pop them into the chat now. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at what we've been typing up. Okay. Yep. Oh, thank you, Jesse. Hardcore, would you like me to post up a quick poll? Just meme responses to see what everybody's take is on what I just covered? Perfect. So I would direct everybody to the type form that Hardcore just posted up in the chat here. This will give us a chance to do another temperature check on the DAO, find out what everybody's feedback is to the new information. Okay, perfect. So that's what I had to cover. Hardcore, I'm going to kick it back your way so that we can segue into the next topic. Thank you for giving me the floor, everyone. I appreciate it.
Yep. And yeah, fully agree. This is why we set the foundation up in the first place, to help protect the DAO from these kind of situations that you're outlining.
I don't know if we. I think we lost Ditch. Oh no, Ditchy's still here. I want to ask, like in terms of from your experience, like what positions do we need to have covered for the foundation, and then like in terms of compliance, assume not counting what we're gonna have to pay, because we will have fees and fines from going not being compliant for the last 2 years. Outside of actually paying off that stuff, which we'll have to do through a DAO vote, what's a realistic annual budget for this stuff? I know from Johnson's point of view, currently it would be, I think our filing and like basic like maintenance of the foundation seemed to be around the 7,000 to 15,000 range. I think it was like 6,800 just for basic, services from them, and then just whatever KYCs we have to do in the future. Outside of just those fees, what are we thinking is a appropriate annual budget? Because I'm assuming we're also going to have to like be more formal with like, because we're technically supposed to be having board meetings and taking minutes and keeping records and stuff like that, which we're not currently doing. We're doing it in a very informal way with these DAOers, basically.
Mm-hmm. Well, to answer the question directly, that's going to be something that's coming out of your experience from actually being in the trenches there and seeing what the individual bills are. But to go meta with it, you're going to need to cover annual compliance fees, annual tax filing, annual tax payments, having a retainer on lawyer, and that's for your general counsel. That's going to work just like a general contractor would in construction, where you find somebody who's a generalist in the legal field, you pay them a retainer, and then you go ask them questions so that they can do the research and refer you out to a specialist lawyer on your topic. So having a legal reserve there would be substantial. Give me a second. I'm doing this in real time. All right, so you're going to need those couple of fees. You're going to need to cover the compensation for the DAO directors. And as far as structure for the executive goes, it's typically a 3-person team. The titles will change between organizations, but in general, you're looking at like a president, a vice president, and a treasurer. President makes your executive calls. The vice president is their executive officer and understudy. And the treasurer holds the purse strings to the treasury, but does not make executive calls. And that way, when the DAO makes a vote, the treasurer can do the final fact check on it to make sure it follows all of the operating agreement rules, all of our internal laws, and then authorize the multi-sig signers to pull the trigger and release the funds. You also generally have a secretary, corporate secretary in-house. And these are the people who are going to be taking all of the notes from our discords, all of our official votes, and putting those into official documentation and meeting minutes. Another thing that can easily live on the blockchain for continuity. That one can be a volunteer position. Now, with Johnson on the outside being called corporate secretary, there's a little bit of crossover in the language there because the role he's actually playing for us is registered agent. And that is another proxy that we put in front of our DAO directors so that any legal documents that come to the DAO, like taxes, lawsuits, and the like, don't come directly to us. And it gives us another layer of another corporate veil we can hide behind. Our official address isn't out there. Our official directors' names aren't out there. It all goes through a third party. But he's also a hybrid where he's working as our corporate secretary inside the shop and our registered agent outside the shop. So in summary, we've got an idea of what the initial charges should be, but we should do a deep dive into what other expenses have been put into the foundation in the past and drum up a budget based on that.
Yeah, so I could say from my personal experience, the foundation, other than incorporation and then payments to directors or multi-sig signers, that's better that we refer to them as that. Those have been the only expenses. The multi-sig signing, which is at this point $8K ghost per year per director, and then the treasurer, Maxi Crouton, is getting, I think, $5K ghost per quarter, so that's $20K ghost per year for being the treasurer, taking on that extra responsibility. So outside of that, currently there are no other expenses other than compliance and then eventually a retainer of some sort. But I just want to make it clear to everybody, like what Ditchy is saying here, like we've had previous conversations about like kind of executive teams, but this is different because this team has literally no, like it's separate than managing the DAO's funds, like, or like kind of like, the previous Aavegotchi treasury forces or stuff like that, where there's a group of people who are kind of gatekeeping or custodians over the DAO in that sense, where they're trying to make sure that people who are coming up with props are doing it the proper way. This is literally just corporate governance so that we're in line with the Cayman Islands compliance, right?
Yeah, and let's make that point very, very clear. We're only suggesting that the directors have autonomy over the legal entity and keeping it running. This doesn't extend into any of the operations of the DAO or any of the games, the funding, or the voting.
Yeah, and Thrax is making a good point. This isn't like, do we want it or not? We have no choice. This is legally required as a corporation, a foundation for us to do. And then I think one of the other things we have to consider, it might be the point where the DAO has to set up legally like banking accounts, because if we do have, I don't know that the Cayman Islands accepts crypto as payment for fines or fees, because we are going to have to pay some previous fines and fees. I think we could use Johnson as a conduit for that, where we give him crypto and then he gets it, off ramps it and pays. But at some point there might be a responsibility where we do have to pay our regular annual fees for compliance, and we only have crypto rails at this point.
Yeah. There are some third-party transition bridges you can use, prepaid debit cards and things of that like. But as soon as you set foot in the fiat operating world, it makes our foundation about 100 times more important. And the way I like to visualize it is this: no matter what we're doing in the DAO, we would like to keep our business private. And when we're behind a foundation, a legal entity like this, nobody's looking at our transactions. They can't see what we're up to. With the foundation down and that corporate veil gone, if that were the case, everything we do is out in public. And an audit of our activities becomes really easy, and now we're in a defensive position trying to justify what we were doing.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess in terms of like our compliance reporting, like saying doing taxes, what like we currently are, like say for the last year, where the DAO has made investments into gaming builds and community-based stuff, no actual return on those investments in terms of revenue of any sort. Us funding projects, like how are we supposed to approach this from a tax perspective as a foundation?
I can't advise you directly on taxes. I don't have the qualifications for that. but I can speak in general concepts to help direct your questions to a tax advisor, so you're not running in circles. From a tax perspective, the foundation is right now a for-profit organization protecting a treasury. And so in general terms, we are a gaming club sitting on a pile of money. We don't have an active business model that generates revenue. But within our Gotchi space, each of our players can build an actual legitimate business model that can be reported on taxes, should they choose. The simple way to break it down is that any gains and losses in flipping gotchis, buying and selling tokens, doing margins and trades, that's all going to fall under capital gains. And then running your land and your farming operation, if you count your profit versus loss, you can report that as an operating business expense, because it's nothing more than doing actual real estate investing in a digital realm. You've got digital real estate, you've got upgrades to your digital real estate, you've got cash flow from it, and you're hiring employees through our scholars to do the work for us. So if you take that profit and loss statement and pass that through to your tax advisor, they can file that as an operating business expense.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. I'm just reading some of the comments that we have going here. In terms, we did beat the shutdown deadline. I threw that in the DAO discussion channel once we talked to Johnson about that. So I guess the next steps are like these roles are necessary. Multi-sig signers I guess there can be overlap here. Like you can be multi-sig and also like these like more governance related roles. Right now, I believe 3 or 4 of the 9 of us have fully KYC to meet Johnson's criteria. I had to go through a whole thing because my name is pretty common. My name is Anthony Velez, and there were 2 other people that I got flagged for, even though my birthday is different, that were like drug trafficking in Pennsylvania and Connecticut. And Johnson had to come back and make me sign a document saying I am not these 2 people because they are flagged by the Caymans. Yeah, so it's like this is legit serious stuff. The full directors, from what I understand, if you're just a multi-sig signer and not actually a trustee or on that level of like these governance roles, the KYC isn't as intense from what I understand. I don't know this 100%, but I guess my question would be, and this is to the whole DAO, how are we supposed to approach picking these roles? Because technically we have our directors. Are we supposed to go through a DAO vote for this to elect people to these governance roles? I just don't know what the process is because I've never gone through this before. I'd love to hear some feedback from people with more experience in the DAO on like how we're supposed to approach this.
Well, since I've got the mic, I'll do a verbal response to that. The executive roles for the foundation, I would highly advise you separate those away from the multi-sig signers. It's the balance of powers philosophy. Your directors of the DAO Foundation are the executive branch of our governance. The DAO itself is the legislative branch, and your multi-sig holders are the treasury. They answer to the executive branch at the will of the DAO, but they should be untethered from all executive decision making. They should just be trustees and key holders.
So if this is the case, then we would need to elect either new governance roles or new people to the multi-sig, since we're trying to avoid that overlap. Because I see what Jesse's saying. Our original foundation docs did state, like the prop, that all 9 directors would be directors on the Cayman Island Foundation. Unfortunately, previous CorpSec, I forgot their name, the Quality something, they only listed 3 of us, and it was the 3 American, directors, which is probably not the best thing. So currently, our foundation only has 3 directors. So I've talked to Johnson about this. Once we are in good legal standing and everything, and we are in good legal standing, but once all the paperwork is done and we start moving forward, we can amend the foundation to have as many directors as we like. We don't necessarily need to have 9, but we need to have those roles filled. I believe, from what Johnson has told me, it's like beyond just like there's member roles, there's supervisor role, and then there's these more official roles. I don't know if there's overlap in those things, but we have to consider if we need to. Oh, I guess you're also American because you live here, China. Like, do we need to separate at that level? Like, basically look for potentially 3 new multi-sig signers since to avoid that overlap or that conflict of interest potentially.
I would say yes. As far as the other layers of management within the organization, if you wouldn't mind grabbing that feedback from Johnson and putting it into the forum, I'd love to read through his recommendations.
Yeah, he hasn't really given us the full recommendations because we were like, basically, let's get us back in order because there was the risk that we would be struck off and then we'd have to take other measures to basically reincorporate maybe in another jurisdiction. So we've avoided that. And now we're at the point where we can, once everything's official and set straight, we'll get our info on basically our compliance fees and penalties because we have been like basically non-compliant for almost 2 years. We were supposed to file taxes each year or like, some kind of annual report to the Caymans. So we'll have to deal with that. And I'll continue to interface with him and get him, get more information as we go. Yeah.
I'm glad that, again, I'm glad that we got this taken care of because even if we had to reform in another jurisdiction, we're literally running from one country to another with our pants down in the meantime.
Yeah, and then me, China, and Mycalium get blacklisted from the Cayman Islands from doing business. That's part of like the threat that was happening. So that's gone. That's great. Cool. But now it's just about organizing so that, because I mean, I'll say it, like as a person who's on the multisig as a director, like not even a director, but like whatever the role they put me so that my name is the first one at the top, that's scary because there's a lot of liability there. Now my family is poor. I don't have really much to worry about getting sued because I have nothing to take and I'll just run. But like there's literally like I don't own anything, but it is still like a huge risk, and it's just getting these things in order so that I can, because it's just not. It's not reasonable to expect people to take this level of risk, the way we've done it. Because, like I was talking to my girlfriend this morning, it's like I've been taking this risk for 2 years without knowing that I was at this level of liability, which is kind of crazy.
Mm-hmm. That's beyond crazy, my friend. Yeah, you are literally our umbrella. Putting all eyes on you to take any liability risk off of the rest of us.
Yeah, and I get that my name is no future, but it's probably not the best move for any of us to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how true is that? Because the way that the Constitution reads, these guys were just executors. I mean, I think there was probably some verbiage from Ross that the guy who helped us set this up, when we asked these questions directly to him, and he just said, no, there's like the directors are not liable for anything because they're just executing the will of the DAO.
Well, from an outside perspective, looking in at our foundation is going to see only the executive directors. So long as we put them on the paperwork, it directs all liability to their front door. The taxing authorities, the compliance authorities, they couldn't care less what our internal operations are, our governance, our constitution, operating agreement. None of that matters. They don't care who votes to make the decisions. They care who executes the decisions.
There's no taxing in Cayman, though.
Well, I think in this particular case, we probably never talked to Ross directly about a case of negligence, because what basically happened here is the foundation was set up and there was no communication between us, the corporate secretary, for 2 years. And then when we finally checked in and asked Johnson to take a look, we were just weeks away from being shut down and blacklisted. So again, I think by default, the only names they see would have been No Futures and a few others, perhaps. So yeah, I see what you mean by placing it at their front door. I think it's going to be situation by situation, but I think they wouldn't care what our Constitution says in that sense. There's only a few names to latch on to. So
yeah, That's just our internal operations. That's how we choose to make our votes in our quorum.
Yeah, it's like even from my conversations with Johnson, like I like telling him kind of our corporate governance, the way we currently do things, like the example of the election. Hey, we held an election because the DAO decided that we needed term limits. He's like, where are the meeting notes? Where's the vote from the directors to make this happen? It's like that's now how our DAO operates. We our imperative is based off of what the DAO decides via snapshot. The Cayman Islands doesn't care about that. Like they need us to work within like the legal confines of what they consider as compliance. So although we are like on chain, like a DAO decentralized, we do have to make sure that the centralized part of us, which is this entity, which is our cover, is like following all the rules. That's why I say, like I've said it before when I mentioned like the idea of having a comms director, like the idea like we can't let these DAO meetings go away. This like I had this idea. I talked a little bit with the facilitators. I don't think the facilitators should be a role that we vote every 6 months. This is something that has to happen because we have to have these meetings. We might even need to make these meetings a little more formal and take minutes and be ready for those issues. Because if we were to get sued and the Cayman Islands or anybody and any entity came and said, "Hey, where are these records?" We don't have any of that stuff, and we'd be in a really bad position.
So going forward, yes, at a bare minimum, we need to be capturing this conversation in typed notes. The critical takeaway is going to be any votes that we take within these meetings that have an official bearing, like our type forms, need to be captured and documented so that they can be reported to the Cayman Islands through the foundation as needed. We're also going to need somebody to go back through our history, dig out all of our official AGIPs and document them in another format, either locking them into the blockchain for immutability or putting them on just a document in the cloud that we can reference back to going, okay, this was the official vote. It was decided, stamp of approval.
So then I guess I'm assuming we would only have to cover the AGIPs going back to the foundation's creation, right? I mean, there are 50 additional AGIPs before the foundation, if I'm not mistaken. Would we need to include those all, or should it be everything, or only from the foundation's creation forward?
So prior to the foundation's creation, what were we voting on in relation or regarding the legal entity? Anything?
Wait, say that one more time? I was reading a comment.
Okay, prior to the founding of the foundation, the structuring of the foundation, were any of those 50 AGIPs voting for the structure of this foundation, or were they unrelated?
They were unrelated. I think AGIP 50 was the one that established the foundation, and then the election of the directors. Everything before that was just we're freeballing it off on chain.
Then, yeah, I think AGIP 50 on forward should be officially documented in the meeting minutes of the company, and then everything before that, yeah, we can capture that and put it in the Gotchi Museum. It's part of our history.
Je suis fatigue. Yeah, the compensation model right now doesn't really cover hardcore. If he spent $900, his quarterly payment at current ghost price are like $800 or like close to 1,000 for the 3 months of signing. Now, I will say, being a director, I've done it for 2 years. It's not a ton of work. We are just signing transactions. It's not about the workload though. It's about the risk. Like signing transactions is easy, but I'm putting, my name is on something where I'm taking the risk. Like if OVIX had gone sideways, me, Mycalium, and Choina would be on the, the whole DAO would be on the hook for that. But it's like ultra focused on us because of the risk we're taking at these governance. Like I don't want to get blacklisted from the Cayman Islands. I don't think that's fair. I don't plan on doing any business in the Cayman Islands. And I mean, other than when I worked at Morgan Stanley, I haven't done any, but that's a risk that we're taking. And the current compensation, if we're just signing transactions, I'm fine with. But if I'm taking that next level of risk, like, because it is different to have to be corporate governance, and then also like take on these new responsibilities of like communications with our CorpSec, making sure that our filings, that's all like, that's a much greater responsibility and duties versus the scope of what we have as multi-sig signers. Even, and I can tell you this anecdotally, any of the directors who are here can say, you know, chime in, but when we got faced with the larger KYC beyond just doxing yourself and knowing, and like, you know, kind of saying what your income is and your source of wealth and potential like for MICA issues, a lot of the directors were not comfortable with that. The landscape has changed for us as directors because it's not as simple as just we're multi-sig signers. We have to make sure that we're also taking care of the corporate governance, because we can't just decide as a DAO that we don't want to do that. If we do, then we need to just go, you know, end the foundation, be fully on chain, and then fully accept the fact that we are completely just, you know, potentially liable as a DAO. And, you know, like what Ditchy has said, the idea that if we did get into any kind of legal trouble, then we could all, you know, be at risk. Versus this setup is more like concentrated. We have these corporate veils to protect us and limit liability.
Which really helps us out by being able to operate off chain. So if the DAO ever wants to do any kind of in real world business, you've got this legal entity in place. And well, I got to put it out there while everybody's listening. You got to understand that a foundation out of the United States in a non-taxable, non-reporting jurisdiction is the #1 most popular way for rich people to launder money. So that's the kind of thing that would have eyes turning towards our foundation, regardless of what we're actually doing inside the game. And I don't want any of the directors getting Sam Bankman-Frieded on this.
Yeah, and Coder Dan just dropped this in. There's precedent for an on-chain DAO being sued, by the way. The viability of DAO structure draws attention after a judge declares that a decentralized autonomous organization is a person under the law. Yeah, like Pig was saying, nothing happened to any individual investors, though. But what happened to the the people behind the foundation? Like, that's the idea. Like, the individual investors are like kind of protected by this, and I wonder what happens. Nothing happened to anyone. Okay, was it they paid a fine. So it was a civil lawsuit. I'm going to read this thing.
Well, do we understand the difference, the legal definition between person and people?
I'm just going to read this thing that Coder Dan dropped. The Oki, I'm hoping I pronounced that right, DAO was found to be an unincorporated association, a form of entity which generally does not provide limited liability to its members. Therefore, if the Oki DAO itself cannot pay the penalty, it remains to be seen if the CFTC will seek to enforce the judgment against one or more individual token holders. In its motion papers, however, the CFTC disclaimed that it would enforce judgment against absent third parties, and the final judgment reiterated this point. Nor does the CFTC's compliant request that the court enter judgment against any individual Oki DAO member on the basis of that member's joint and several liability for a judgment against the Oki DAO.
Translation is, if the court wants to pursue the individual token holders within that DAO as member managers, once the case goes to discovery, every one of us would get subpoenas to KYC.
Yeah.
This was back in the kind of Biden era. I think the times have changed and are changing, but from what I've read, it seems like the SEC has stopped all of its lawsuits against various crypto projects. But the CFTC, who is the one that went after Oki DAO, doesn't seem to be like slowing down or getting nerfed by this administration. So just something to consider.
Yeah, I think the TLDRs, it's not fun, and especially for anybody in an elected doxed position within the DAO. We're at the whim of, nobody knows what the future holds, right? It could be a hack, there could be a very weird vote, there could be a scandal of some kind that nobody could anticipate. And it just, anyway, we have the foundation, thank goodness, we saved it. And I'm gonna have to hop off here in a minute, but Ditchy, I'm really appreciating your taking the time to join us today. Where have you been? Come by anytime.
Yeah. I've been lurking here since Haunt 2.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. But great having you on stage. I definitely recognize the handle, but yeah, good to have you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, hardcore, come up if you're available. Yeah, and I guess it's just like moving forward. Like once we get back the info from Johnson, we can if we need to amend the foundation to add these extra directors versus having them just as multi-sig, and deal with the issue of like whether or not like we will need new directors, because some of the directors for MiCA compliance reasons, which is perfectly understandable, it's a huge risk for them and their IRL businesses and finances to be able to get on this, for the rules changing, especially in Europe. Once we do that, we know what we need. We sort of know what we need. We need to move forward with like choosing people, electing people for these positions, and then compensation. Because it can't, like, I mean, I'm not gonna. This is $1 million foundation, and I'm getting paid less than to be a Kroger, cash register operator, but taking the legal liability and risk of like a fucking $20 million foundation is nuts. Like that's just not. That's not realistic. I think it's unfair.
Now, the compensation needs to be significantly higher than that, but I won't recommend any numbers until we start talking about how we're going to tie it to revenue or our treasury balance or risk assessment. So that's the discussion that the DAO will need to get into.
Yeah, so ultimately, we'll continue the conversation once we get more info from Johnson. The TLDR is we're going to need to take care of these things, potentially have an annual budget for compliance related issues, and then to get legal counsel on a retainer so that we can make sure that we, just in case, or like, I don't know if we necessarily need, I mean, we should have legal counsel on retainer, but if we have connections to legal counsel that if we do need to grab one for a specific situation, we should have a discretionary fund that's used toward this. Now, remember, this annual budget would be specifically earmarked towards the maintenance of the foundation. There's nothing else that goes beyond that. There's no decisions that are being made towards the DAO treasury. Everything else is just pretty much the same, except that we are covering our ass on the liability and legal front with our foundation. All right. Thank you so much for coming up and speaking with us, Ditchy. I don't know if Hardcore is still intending to come up. I think he's looking for a mic. What we'll do in the moment while we wait for him to chime in, FaZe, do you want to jump in and just go through the active proposals, and we'll kind of handle the rest of the meeting as we go?
Yeah, sure. Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear. Thank you.
Nice. I was having some issues earlier. Yeah, I sent an invite to Hardcore. There are 2 live proposals up this week. We didn't have anything end. The first is the Pizza DAO and Aavegotchi 2025. I guess it's a sponsorship funding request. It ends in 21 hours, but it's only at 41% quorum right now, so it doesn't look good. And then we have Agate 145, adjusting quorum requirements and increasing voter XP, which ends in 2 weeks and is sitting at 44% quorum right now with a overwhelming yes, make proposed adjustments. Yeah, I don't know what that means for the Pizza DAO request. I think it was too late last time, right? They said they got this prop up too late, so I don't know if they're going to be resubmitting with a longer timeline or voting period. But that's about it as far as proposals go. I'm pretty sure everybody here already voted. If you haven't, please go do that. About what you guys were saying earlier. So I think Hardcore kind of like answered it with this screenshot that he posted. Because it seems like what needs to happen is that they're just, Jesse said it a couple times in the chat here, was that the original language, the original documents that the foundation is based on, which is like Agate 50, it just kind of needs to be amended, right? A lot of time has passed since that passed, and for all these things to happen, like I don't think there's going to be a lot of pushback at all from the DAO side, but their language needs to be updated for sure. So I think this pretty much covers it. Like it's a lot of text, but I was looking at it just now, and it seems like it's got all the updated language. You know what I mean? So that there will be a distinction between these roles. And then obviously, like the compensation and stuff like that, like just so that it exists somewhere. It's not just internal decision making happening and then being applied, and there's no real like record of it. So I think like most of this could be taken care of in a single prop. I might need to, if you're going to do some kind of like election separately, but I don't think that's the case. Have you looked at this at all in the future? The proposal, like the draft?
Are we talking about the screenshots that Hardcore put up there? I've looked at it
Yeah.
a little. I just wonder, because technically our Constitution was written, by Ross or somebody within his like range of, like within his agency. So we might need a lawyer to come in and redraft this or to work on it, because I don't know that any of us currently, any of the directors are qualified to do that.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. I thought it was
Well,
Jesse.
so
Yeah, Jesse was the. Oh, welcome, Hardcore. How's it going?
Hey. So yeah, the document that we just signed and turned into Johnson, that is a legal Cayman's document, and we did sign it, but we didn't ask a lawyer about it. But it is signed, and actually, Futuristic signed it. He turned in the transfer in document, which is the official one that has that essentially has made him, I believe, actually, Future is our quote unquote founder at this point.
Well, I don't know if that's
And
the case, because I know
Johnson said something cryptic and called me the protector. He said, I name him the protector. I don't know what that means at all. He hasn't responded to my question of what does that mean? Do we have roles? Hasn't been answered. Ditchy's looked over this thing numerous times, and all he comes up with is that we are definitely liable for something here. And so it's like the wheels are in motion, and like our feet are already on the ground here, and we are already liable. So it would be really good if the if the DAO could authorize us to at least have enough initial pay here to cover ourselves in case something happens in this first couple months.
Real quickly, I just want to chime in that the document that I signed, it was both me and Choina, because me, Choina, and Mike Callium are listed as the three, like on the official Cayman Islands documents, like when you go on the register, we're listed as like the founders or the directors or whatever the positions, because you need a director, supervisor, member. So we had to sign that in order to transfer over Johnson as our new CorpSec. So we were able to do, I think Thrax drafted something, or Johnson. So first we had to sign to have Mike Callium removed, and then show the AGIP and all that other stuff. And then now we'll add in that third person. I'm not sure who it is yet, but yeah, we'll have to Jesse's
Well,
point.
I think that, so 2 days ago, I submitted mine to Johnson, and immediately after I did that is when he came back and said everything's submitted and we're good. So I think when I did that, he put me in as the member.
Yeah, we'll need more clarity, because
I was just waiting on the letter of recommendation from Jesse. Yeah, but he hasn't replied to us yet saying, well, what does that mean?
Yeah, I need to know, like, honestly, like, what roles have we been pushed into? Because me and you were talking yesterday. It's like, even if I'm listed as the founder, I'm not comfortable with that. Like, I have no discretion. I've always said this, like, from the very beginning. We're directors. We just multi-sig sign. We do the will of the DAO. So it becomes funky when it's like, no, Future, you have to do this because this is your role. It's like, wait a minute. Like, if I do this, then now it's like I've lost the veil of I don't have discretion, because now it seems like I do have discretion, which puts me at a huge legal liability, because now it seems like I'm making decisions on behalf of the DAO, which is not the case. I do what the DAO tells me to do versus me deciding what the DAO should do. So that's why I want to make sure that, like, once we get this through, Johnson comes back, we can go about this the proper way and make sure that everything's set and ready, because it's a lot, and it's not in the spirit of the original AGIP in terms of the scope of what directors do. So once we have more information about that, we can do that. Yeah, I should not be.
And
Your
then
CEO
conversely,
shouldn't
I
be
feel
named
that
No Future.
I actually personally feel the opposite of how No Futuristic feels, where if you put me in a situation like that and you don't give me autonomy, I'm just going to take autonomy because I live my life by you can't stop me if you put me in a situation. Like if you put me in a liable situation and say I don't have autonomy, well, then you've given me autonomy because I'm going to defend myself.
Yeah, but see,
And
defend yourself
I'm
is
going to
step
do
down.
what I feel is that I've been told to do, whether implicitly or by the law or by the situation, and then immediately come back to you. But I mean, if something were to happen right now, if my name is on that and No Futuristic doesn't immediately stand up and something happens, I'm going to immediately stand up and I'm going to expect people to get behind me and support me in whatever the heck happens there, because it's kind of, Star Trek One Spock situation where the needs of the many outweigh the needs of one person.
Yeah, but I think that's
I mean,
dangerous.
but logically, by not standing up, everyone's fucked.
No, but
If
that's
you do
why
stand up,
it's a
one
collective,
person's
though.
fucked.
We have to.
You're still fucked.
I get that. I'm
You don't
fucked
need to
anyway,
fuck everyone
though.
else just because it doesn't help,
I get that. It's just
it doesn't become less bad if we don't take action.
Yeah,
Doing
see-
nothing is an action.
See, this is what Lasserin is saying. Operating outside of your role opens the whole company to liability. I'm very aware of this. We dealt with this with Mike Callium to a degree, where he wanted to take on or push for us to have more power beyond what our traditional role is. That the point is, like, we do run a very huge risk. Like the DAO, us signing a document to get the DAO in order is different than me making a executive decision. Because although, I'm in a position on paper where I can do that, I could theoretically go to Johnson and say, "Hey, shut down the whole damn thing." Like that, we shouldn't take on that responsibility because that's not what is outlined in the AGIP. We weren't elected to do those things. And yes, if I want to protect myself, I should do something. But just like the AGIP says, just like with voting, I can't vote no. I can just not vote. So if my only, in my opinion, route here is if I see something wrong and I have to deal with it, is I can step down. That's all I can do. We're not authorized to do anything beyond what the DAO says, because if we do that, we're not a DAO. And we fought with people in this DAO before about making us not a DAO.
We actually have not been a DAO this entire time. Let's a little reality check here. There's numerous AGIPs where the DAO never implemented them. They were voted in as core props, not implemented. These were financial ones even. There's one that still hasn't been handled. And
Are you talking Alchemica?
Honestly, if I was going to sue the DAO over something, that's the one I would pick, is why didn't you fund the LPs?
Well, we didn't have a foundation
we voted
there.
to fund the LPs. The LPs are funded essentially with our voting power. And then the DAO did not comply with that. And various larger holders basically just said, well, we're not going to do that because whatever. And subverted the will of the DAO. And the directors went along with that. So, there's a hanging chad right there.
Well, we didn't, because if you go back, the Alchemica LPs happened before the foundation. That was pre-foundation. LPs. The reason the LPs didn't go through was because the ATF didn't feel comfortable with actually funding it because of the legal liability on them, because there was no corporate veil from the foundation. That is the reason why the Alchemica LPs didn't go through.
Actually, I don't believe that's true. If you can look at the timeline, the ATF came into existence after the foundation. It's actually the next tile on there.
That is not true.
And
ATF, ATF is
the original. We're gonna fund 50,000 into each of the Alchemica LPs was not end of 2022.
Yeah,
I believe it was more like 2021 or early.
Yeah, so
early 2022.
LPs, those votes happened pre-foundation, because I remember Dr. Wagme being like, he didn't want to take that legal risk by doing these things.
Yeah, because we're right. Yeah, the LPs was when the DTF existed, the ATF didn't exist, and then the foundation was being created. And then things went on pause. And I believe this was largely a political decision based on we didn't hire an executive team, which all of this comes back to that. We never hired an executive team. We never put someone in the hot seat because we never had, I don't know, I guess we just don't trust ourselves or trust each other or motives or anything. But 4 years into this, we have to trust somebody at this point. Like we know who you are. We know who everybody is at this point, as far as who has been consistent over the years, and we know what the situation is with them. I mean, that may or not lead to trust, but at least we know what we feel about them. And I guess we have a social credit rating at this point.
Yeah. So
like in any situation, I think I know what you're going to do because you've given me your logic and your reasoning numerous times, and it's pretty consistent over the years. Yeah, whether it's monkey with the ledger or I'm not taking personal initiative other than what I am told to do.
Yeah, see, Ditchy has a good point here because there is a difference between what we're talking about with an executive team here versus the previous executive teams. Previous executive teams wanted like control of the purse in the sense of like they're like numerous various, like I think I forget the acronym, but the Aavegotchi grant proposals, like the idea of being able to curate and help people get through the process to get funding or to get funding.
They wanted to create like whole bureaucratic structures.
Yeah, but that's separate from this.
I think what we're asking for here is like a much smaller level of autonomy, such as we need a credit card or debit card that acts as a slush fund that we have a small budget that we can handle bills with. We need the ability to, like, amongst ourselves, make decisions if there's an emergency or something completely untoward happens. We are going to go to the DAO and have like a 3-week proposal over, director number 7 did something weird. The rest of us are going to have to decide. We should have the autonomy to decide how we handle that internally while we go to the DAO and get a ruling. I guess you'd call it interim powers.
Yeah, see, I don't think, from my perspective here, our interim powers as as executives of the foundation, not of the DAO, because that's a completely separate thing, is
right.
We handle updates to documents for our compliance. We make the executive decisions like, hey, we need to hire a lawyer, or we have to spend money to pay Johnson to update some documents.
Like letting PC pay Johnson was an executive decision, whether you think of it that way or not. That was actually an executive autonomous decision when we allowed PC to pay for that. Because essentially PC owes the DAO money, right? So if we accept money from PC, we are front running the DAO being paid back for stuff, and this muddies the situation. If you accept money from someone, you've actually created a contract of sorts. And so, like, do we owe PC for that? Is there a quid pro quo there? Were we even authorized to let them pay for us? There's a lot of things happening there.
The thing with that, though, is that we have to do a prop to pay them back.
Trying to be like a jerk lawyer, I could absolutely say that opened the door to any this liability that you're scared of happens when you make a decision.
Yeah, see, this is different, though, because with PC, they're fronting us the money. There is no guarantee. And I'm not saying that we're not going to pay them back, but there is no guarantee that we pay them back. We have to pass a prop to make that happen. This was like emergency, because getting struck off is a way worse situation than, us arguing about it. Like,
oh, yeah.
Yeah. We have to do
something.
On
a basic level, like we already paid them back. I don't think anyone's going to argue that wasn't just the first payment on the money they borrowed from us. I mean, there you go.
To be honest, though, that's not what we said.
From one hand to the other, to the pocket to Johnson. If someone owes you $100 and they buy you dinner for $10, they owe you $90. That's you don't like now owe each other in two directions.
I mean, there's separate liabilities, though. Like, and we did have a conversation in these DAO calls where it's like we would be, put a prop forward to repay them. Like, it's basically a loan. The contract that we have with them for the $3 million is completely separate from this. If we're doing accounting, that's a whole different part, like a different line on the ledger. So yeah, we could think of it like they offset, but that's not technically. We had a contract with them for that loan where this is separate. Also, it's like what Jesse's saying, it's not really like a big deal in terms of us paying. Like PC's not too worried about it. Saving the DAO on a tight timeline had to be done. So my worry is that we as directors, we cannot start like there's no our scope as written by the AGIP and our constitution is very limited. We have to update that so that we have the proper roles for the governance side of that. But that doesn't give us any additional roles beyond that. Like us as directors, if someone put through a transaction to do something illegal and it passed the DAO's vote, the only recourse we have is to not sign the transaction. We can't literally do anything else. Now, can we change that? We could go and make amendments and do all this other stuff, but currently written, if we move outside of that, I feel it puts us at legal liability. And it's also like, it breaks the veil that this is a DAO. We are a DAO. Even if it's centralized in certain ways, the setup is that we as a collective are voting and moving together in a common objective, right? So we just got to be careful that us as directors, that we're not superseding our responsibilities, because then it changes our communal social contract that we have as members of the DAO and also people as multi-sig signers for the DAO.
Yeah, in fact, on that tip, who is our treasurer right now?
Maxi
Did
Crouton,
Maxi stay? Did Maxi go?
He hasn't left, but remember, treasurer is like informal. He's not our treasurer on paper. He's the treasurer for on chain. He gives us basically monthly reports on our treasury.
He's been the treasurer, and he's been paid for it.
Yeah, but he's not legally listed. Like if we go to the Cayman Islands, Maxi Crouton's not even on the foundation.
Correct, but he's been acting. He's been the acting treasurer.
But not even,
and
because if he was, we'd have
his services, or do we not? Because I'm not clear on what happened there. When we changed the KYC requirements back and forth, he was in, he was out, and then he said he was back in. And if we could keep him, we absolutely should.
Yeah, it's just different because what he was doing.
He's been a stellar performer, and none of us actually are going to do a better job. And frankly, like he does a great job of it. So, are you here, Maxie? Like, are you with us? Is it still you?
Real quickly, No, Ditchy says, do we have the stomach to give veto power to any role? To be honest, I don't know the answer to that, because currently I don't think the DAO is set up in a way that any director, like I said, we're all equal, but in our equalness, we have no power. Like we just signed multi-sig transactions. Choina said it. That's basically all the directors that signed up for the role. It was specifically to sign multi-sig transactions with the idea that our foundation is the legal cover for us to do that without us being liable. Now, in terms of veto power, it's
that's a verbal agreement at this point.
No, it's written down.
As of last night, you actually technically have the power to you have veto power, and you actually did exercise it last night. And well, Chanya also exercised it last night, and
we didn't do anything though.
By my own personal choice of compliance, I also had the same power.
No, but see, you're superseding your scope. Like
it only takes one of us only takes one of us to not sign to start the thing there.
Yeah, but there's a difference like that.
And you not signing can break the foundation.
That's not
you're
true
one
at
of
all.
the two.
That's not
you
true.
You and Chanya not signing something breaks the whole thing.
It's not true. We need 5 of 9 people to sign. What you were talking about last night was, we were talking about the whole lagging thing. Does he want to be a director or not? Should we make the choice to move FIFO up? I said last night, we do not have the discretion to do that. That's not our choice. We don't have, literally, we can't do that. That is outside of the scope. I know, we can, we're trying to move in the best interest of the DAO, but we can't supersede our scope. We're not allowed to do that. When we had Mike Callium not voting, we couldn't do anything.
In our scope.
Say it again?
That got handled that did get handled, and it got handled within our scope.
But it didn't, because no one made a choice. You pressured him.
Understanding with Lagan where he has agreed to do the thing that he didn't want to do, and therefore he is not resigning. And then which means we do not have to default to what would have been determined by the AGIP that does exist, which is the one it's the second to last one in the list there that FaZe had already put through, which does detail that it would be FIFU and then it would have been FIFU and then Nadia.
Yeah, but see, Lagan has to formally.
Nadia, because we don't know if Yeah, we don't know if Maxi Crouton is still with us or not.
What I'm saying though is that we don't have the discretion to say Lagan wants to, like Lagan told you potentially in a private conversation that he was going to step down. That is not enough for us to make a decision and say, FIFO, you're in. We need to have him say that to us. We need to go to the DAO, inform them, and go through this whole process. It's like the idea, like just because I'm listed on paper.
That's not what the AGIP says.
What are you talking about?
We passed an AGIP, like the one that FaZe put up like last month.
Yeah, but Lagan
FaZe,
telling you that he wants to quit is not a formal thing.
Actually, Lagan wrote it. Lagan wrote the thing. It's in Lagan's name.
But you can't take those steps.
What I did last night was confirm with Lagan exactly what he meant, and he did not mean that he was out. He meant he was out of something else. So we confirmed that, and I believe as of today he has completed his stuff, and you could put him in there.
I'm trying to find
himself recused himself. He doesn't need the DAO's permission to recuse himself. The DAO doesn't get a say on him recusing himself. If he recuses himself, there's already a person that's been picked and voted in specifically.
Yeah, but bro,
like
there's a process here that's being
that
skipped.
It even said stuff about first
Let me speak
Aavegotchi.
real quick. You're overstepping the boundaries, though. You messaged me, you messaged Choina telling us that Lagan's out. We need to move FIFO up. I got a message from FIFO. He's saying, hey, am I a director now? And I told him, hey, Hardcore's acting outside of the scope of his role. Until Lagan comes in and tells
I didn't message FIFO. I messaged you asking you to
FIFO
confirm
messaged
with
me.
Lagan.
I did not talk to FIFO before he messaged me.
Confirm whether he was confirming that he was recusing himself.
Yeah, FIFO messaged me saying that he was told by you that he's now a director. Yeah, I mean, FIFO messaged me saying that you told him.
Like if you want to not sign and resign, the DAO doesn't get a say in that. You just resign, and obviously the rest of us are going to be like, "Are you sure?"
See, this is the point.
Did you do that?
Lagan is saying he never said he was out. You started the process of removing him unilaterally. You can't do that. That's not our roles here.
I told you to go confirm.
Yeah, and I said let him come to when Lagan
because
comes
you're the secretary.
No, I'm
As
not.
The secretary,
what are you talking about? I have no role. Don't you understand this? Like just because somebody wrote down on a piece of paper that I'm the secretary, I have not agreed to that. I have not been compensated for that. If I'm going to be forced into this position and I'm not compensated, I will step down. That is my right. The role Lagan's in here saying he never said that. When Lagan comes to the director chat and he says,
he just said he was out. And I needed to confirm what the word out meant, and it was out of something else. It was a sentence fragment was the issue.
Yeah,
but
my point is,
so
Lagan
when you submitted the
us.
transfer in document, you did agree to something, and that's just what's hurting my brain. I cannot comprehend.
I did not agree to anything. Without my permission, I was added. I did not. People added me to a document and put me in a role for 2 years. I had no idea that I was in. The only way we can get our DAO in order is if me, Choina, and potentially Mike Callian, we got around that, signed off saying that Johnson is in. We couldn't do this without us doing it. We were forced to do this. This is not a choice. I wasn't elected to do this. We're just, you're
using the word duress then.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be blacklisted
from action. You did it under duress, but I can wrap my brain around that. That's more clear to me.
Yeah, but the point
if this was done under duress, that is a non-action.
Unless Lagan comes to our chat and tells us, "Hey guys, I'm quitting," then we can move forward. It can't be a thing like you have a message with him and now you're kind of conferring with people on the side. That's completely outside of the scope of our jobs right now. Now, once Johnson comes back and tells us, hey, we have this structure, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this, we all agree to it, then we can have that conversation. But we're being preemptive here by making discretionary choices that we don't have. We just can't do that. That's my standing. Yeah, but FIFO came to me and said, hey, Hardcore's telling me I'm a director now. And I told him, no, that is absolutely wrong. We need to wait until we get official comms and we go through a process, which would be Lagan coming to us saying, hey guys, thanks, but no thanks, I'm out. just like Maury did, and eventually who was the like Aavegotchi? First, Aavegotchi has kind of said that based on the KYC requirements, although I don't think he'll go that route. Sir Linkius did the same thing. We didn't unilaterally decide to remove Sir Linkius. Even with Mycalium, I made this point. People in our chat were saying Lagan hasn't been present here for 2 weeks. We went months without Mycalium really being actively present, and we had a whole conversation about
how has that happened? That should not happen.
Because it's outside of our scope as directors to be able to tell Mycalium you're off. We can't do that. That is literally not within our scope.
I think that's negligent to not change your scope. Then, if you discover that you're being put in a situation where you are,
scope, hardcore,
we are
we're
like
DAO.
legally impotent but
This
liable.
is crazy. We can't just change our scope.
Hold on, you guys take turns. Take turns.
We
man,
can't
so
just
we can
change
hear
our
you guys.
scope. We just can't change our scope. That is beyond. That's not right. You can't. I can't just decide now I'm the president and I'm going to go to Johnson and say, hey, we're going to dissolve this. That's not what the spirit of what we did when we set up this foundation. I think you have to be very careful of overstepping your responsibilities. Even if you're trying to be a protector, you are creating issues that you can't do that. And Mycalium, to be fair with this whole Lagan thing, Mycalium was kind of in and out, but inactive. We were still able to get our votes through. There were a couple issues with some of the aerodrome stuff that happened. It was during the summertime, but we have never had like a process where it's like, even when that whole thing with Mycalium happened, we never really implemented how to fix this. It became a thing where, we're going to look at minimum thresholds and maybe
I personally find that to be negligent behavior. When you're aware of a problem, if you see it, it's yours. Like if you know that someone is going AFK for months at a time and you don't know if you can contact them, and you're aware of it, you bring that to the other people in the group and you say, "Are you aware of this?"
We did that.
And then
literally, I came to the DAO and it's like he hasn't been signing.
Aware of it. You can't get a hold of the person. You start taking action, and the action might be going to the DAO, or it could be getting the entire group of people and saying, "Well, are we all resigning?" Because
but what he's saying is, as it stands right now, that's the only action. Like based on the agaps that we already have, like that's the only action that you have is to take it to the DAO, right? So if you want to change that,
by not taking it to the DAO, you're taking an action.
But we took
it to the DAO. If I'm aware that your house is on fire and I don't tell you,
I understand.
Hardcore, but
that analogy, right? But that analogy doesn't work here because it's not the same thing. The people that got elected to these positions did so under certain terms, right? Their powers are limited to signing. That's it.
Right.
That's what
your power of not signing is a resigning. And so if somebody is not signing,
abstaining.
And the other people that are signing are not confirming that this person still exists even, then they are through their inaction taking action. They're not doing something is doing something.
I don't know if this happened while you were gone, but we literally went through this. We came to the DAO and look, Mycalium has not been voting. What's our recourse as DAO Foundation directors to handle this? Because we don't know what we're supposed to do. We can't unilaterally decide to kick him out.
Right.
DAO, what should we do? That's our only action. That is literally.
And what did you do?
We went to the DAO. Nothing really happened.
What was the resolution?
The DAO didn't really decide on a resolution.
And then that led to what?
That led to the term limit.
That led to term limits, actually.
It
led to a new election. It led to a new election.
And it led to us being in the situation where we've got Mycalium's name on a document, and now No Future is in a situation created by this inaction that was not handled properly.
You can't say that we didn't handle it properly if it's not our role. How can I don't know that I'm like, I was not.
You don't handle it, it's not handled.
Okay, this is beyond the scope of what we're doing. As a director, when I signed up, I never had a impetus that I have to contact CorpSec on a regular basis. We didn't even know that we needed to go through CorpSec to remove Maury. Like, these are things that happen that, honestly, I blame Ross because he's the one that created this structure and then didn't give us what we needed to do to keep it moving forward. So it's not my job. I'm a multi-sig signer. Just because you wrote my name down without my permission doesn't mean I have any responsibility beyond the scope of what you've done. That's like making me it just doesn't make no damn sense. And that's why I'm pushing back so hard now that I know that oh shit, you just put all this legal liability on me and that I don't have to act. My only act in this situation is to walk away. I can step down and say, I don't want to be a director anymore. I don't have the right to decide McCallum, I don't like McCallum. He's not doing his job. Kick his ass out. That's not how we do it. We have to come back to the DAO. This is why I'm warning against this, because I saw this shit with McCallum. We cannot be stepping outside of the scope of our roles. We can evolve the roles through the DAO to make sure we're covering ourselves, because obviously we weren't doing that before. But we can't just unilaterally decide that this is what we're going to do. That it'd be like if we.
Okay, so what are we doing now?
We are waiting for Johnson to come
How
back.
are we going to evolve this now?
I'm going through it. I'm going through it.
You've got one foot out the door.
I do not. I'm just telling you that, like,
well, you bet you've signed. You're saying that it was signed under duress.
You're saying that. I'm not saying that. I said I signed to get shit right. We can decide once everything's right what I will do. But putting this on me, like I didn't do something, that's bullshit. And I'm not gonna stand here and accept that. Like what happened is the next steps are Johnson comes back. We have our DAO compliant. Now as a DAO, we decide what roles do we need? How do we pay these people these roles? What discretion do these new roles have? We can't, it's like saying like, hey man, we have to pay our annual bills. Let's just sign
so we're
spin
here
up a transaction
right
to pay ourselves.
Let him finish.
Here right now. Why are you talking about the future?
Because
that's what needs to happen. Like that was the beginning of this call, right? There's changes that need to be happen. And the way for those changes to happen is not by one person or two people agreeing to it. We got to take it to a DAO decision. That's it. So like if we update the terms and everyone's on the same page, then they can vote on it, and then it will be. You know what I mean? But until then, we can't just be like,
the fourth month of the year. We started this on the first month of the year, and we're still talking about in the future we're going to do something and make a decision and consult with the DAO. We're talking to the DAO right now.
But how
Which
are
one of
DAO
us
decisions
is
made?
going to start writing a document? Like one of us should start writing a document
Absolutely,
and take it to the DAO, like immediately. Who's going to take responsibility?
I've already started with the discretionary fund proposal, the forum post about the idea just to get us compliant. In terms of, we can't do anything right now until we consult with Johnson once everything's set. We know that we're not getting struck off, but we still haven't completed the full process. Once we have Johnson and we know exactly what we need to do, then we could do that. Doing anything beforehand is risky at best and is not in the spirit of the documents that created us and gave us this power. As multi-sig signers, we are not supposed to have any discretion. We're just signers. Now, obviously, that was a mistake. We should have had, and that's why I say I kind of blame Ross for this. We should have known that we needed these corporate roles and all these other things so that we were compliant. My understanding, and I'm sure Choina will agree, is that we are paying an agent to represent and handle all of that compliance stuff for us. That agent disappeared. None of us even knew that we were supposed to continue working with it. That these things have to be laid out. It's the same thing, like you say, like at the beginning of the year, we had an election that we brought on directors. That AGIP said, hey, the director's new term starts the day this election passes. Afterward, we realized that can't happen. They have to be KYC'd. We have to make sure that people are not from sanctioned countries because we run a risk of OFAC violations and all this other shit. That process wasn't there. We have to build these processes, but we can't just make decisions willy-nilly because the process is off. This is why we need to kind of work this all out.
Okay, I'm not arguing any of that. I am asking you, you said you started this one. Are you taking responsibility for that?
I don't have to answer that question because you're not
one of us.
I don't have to answer to you, friend.
For whatever part you don't want to take responsibility for.
I think
you're
overstepping.
Someone should step up. And
yo, bro, you need to sit down. Like telling me what responsibilities I need to take and how I'm not taking responsibilities is crazy. I've been here free for the last couple months. No, listen, you need to listen a little more. For the last couple months, I've taken my own free time. I'm not compensated to do this to help the DAO and try to get this done. Everybody wants shit to get done in the DAO and nobody does anything. I literally did this of my own volition. Telling me I don't want to do it is trash. I've sat through this process and I've been a good steward for the DAO. Now, do I want to continue to do this? We can discuss that. I'm not being derelict of any responsibility that I have as a DAO director because my only legal responsibility based on the contracts that I have via these AGIPs and the election process is that I'm a multi-sig signer. What we do outside of that, we can discuss. But to come to me and say, I need to do this, I need to do that, this is just more evidence of you overstepping the authority that you have as a simple multi-sig signer. That is not a choice for you to make.
I'm not telling you to do anything. I am asking you, because you just said that you started a process. I am asking you what the scope of what you are doing in that process is, so I can determine if I or somebody else needs to pick up the
But
rest of that,
that's
or if
not
you
your
were
job to
doing
determine
that.
this.
I'm not telling you anything. I'm asking you to
This is not your
clarify
job. I don't have to though.
what you
I am a bridge.
doing.
I'm getting us to compliance. Once we are compliant, we can go forward from there. You are not an authority to me. You have to understand that. I don't care if you told me how smart I was last week. You are just another DAO member. I'm working in the best interest of the DAO, and that's what I'm doing. I don't have to tell you what my plans are. If people want me to be a secretary or a treasurer or a president, that's fine. I have not said, you're the only one that's saying I should be the secretary. You've elected me to a role that I haven't actually said I'm interested in. This has been you pushing this forward. Am I comfortable with doing these roles? Sure, but I get to make that decision, not you. And you don't have any kind of authority over me to tell me what I need to do or what part of the process I have to take. That's not how this works, Betty. You're overstepping your limits here and the scope of the job that we're doing.
Yeah, which is the whole point. So like if there are different jobs, they have to have titles, and then they have to have responsibilities.
And a formal
that
vote.
needs to be presented to the DAO. Exactly. And then the DAO has to vote on those, and then they're implemented, man. Just exactly how we did everything else. You know what I mean?
Followed the procedure very well,
really...
I think. There's a lot of things that need to be fixed and things that could have been done better in the past. Now, those things, I don't think it's the director's fault that Ross's company that he got us for compliance went under. We didn't even know that was something we had to deal with. That's not on us. The same thing with just like in general, we have to get through this process. Once we are compliant, we can come back and approach the DAO. We need these things. This is the budget that we need. We can go through this process. Do we need to elect these people, or can we decide this internally as directors? That all has to be told to us by the DAO. We do not currently have the discretion to do any of that. We're all working in good faith to make sure that the DAO is compliant, but we still have to honor and respect the process of the DAO. We can't just start making willy-nilly. This is why I keep stressing to everybody, like, these governance roles are not an executive team. There is no power to veto. They're literally placeholder names for the liability parts of the corporation. This is not the same as the Aavegotchi grants program. This is not the same as the DAO Treasury Fund. We are literally just part of the protective layer to protect the DAO. We're being paid because of the risk we're taking, not because of anything else. We're all monkeys with a ledger. That's right.
Yeah.
So am I completely confused in my understanding that you are doing the process that you said you were doing, and you're going to continue doing that, and we should just chill and wait for you to complete what you were doing?
That's absolutely not what I'm saying.
Unless you say that you were not doing something.
That's not what I'm saying.
I'm just trying to determine what is happening.
What happened?
I'm not trying to tell you to do something. I just want to know what you're doing and what you're not doing.
Yeah. So like what I said, I stepped up.
I extreme anxiety about like lack of information.
But see, you're asking for things that you're not entitled to. The simple facts of this is we needed someone to contact our CorpSec when we thought the CorpSec was still working. There is no role to do that. I just did it because I have a background in tax accounting and dealing with compliance. I stepped up and did that. We made the initial contact, found out, oh shit, this guy's, our CorpSec is not responding. So then that's when Pixelcraft stepped in and brought in Johnson, Lutetia. Now we had Johnson and them on a meeting. I stepped up in that sense because no one else was doing it, and this is important. So that doesn't mean that this is now my role. It means I'm literally acting in an intermediary position here where I'm just interim position where I'm not the secretary, but I will do these roles so that we can get back on track. If you want me to be the secretary, we can discuss that in the future, but currently that is not my role. I'm doing this as a favor. This is not my responsibility. It's not my liability. It's just literally, it's like, Troy is saying the directors were rugged by both legal and corporate. I can't speak for anyone else, but I have absolutely no experience in any corporate leadership and never agreed to it. As far as I know, we are working through a process with Johnson, our new CorpSec, not hardcore. So that's the point. Like, Johnson has advised us kind of like, hey, you and Troina and Mycalium are listed on these documents. We can't do anything unless you act. You guys have to be the ones to sign. We can't transfer over anything unless these people who are legally on the documents. I didn't choose to legally be the one that has to sign off, but if I don't sign off, then we get struck off. So it's like, it's a situation where we have to make an action, but it's not a discretion thing. It's not me choosing like, oh shit, let's do this. We have to respect the process of the DAO. And if we want to expand on that, that's fine, but we can't be so reactive where we start changing everything because you're opening up more liability to us, because our protection is that we don't have discretion. Once you start giving me discretion, you're giving me legal liability, and that's not what I signed up for. And like, I can do that, but like, we have to negotiate this shit. I'm not going to jail for $1,000 a quarter. That's crazy.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
we have to wait for like Foreign saying, once Johnson comes back to us, we can make the appropriate moves, but we can't do anything until that. We have become compliant. Now we have to fix everything. That is a process that the DAO, we have to go through our governance to make sure is done appropriately. We figure out what roles we definitely need. We can't be like, you're in the background choosing what role you're doing, what role I'm doing. That's not your choice. It's the DAO's choice. So what you're saying actually doesn't fucking matter at all. We need the DAO to come together and make these decisions. And I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm not trying to go against you. I think you do a good job in one of these positions, but we have to respect the process, because if we don't, you're opening up legal liability for other people beyond yourself.
So just for myself here, my understanding then is that any action you have taken was taken under duress, essentially.
No, it's I don't know why you're so focused on this duress,
but not really under your own power, because you had to do it. Otherwise, the whole thing blows up. So it's not really your action. It's an action of emergency interim power that was not chosen by you. It was chosen by the situation.
This doesn't really matter in this situation. It doesn't change anything. Like I can say, we're going in circles here. This is not helping whatsoever.
Yeah.
I feel like we're both saying the same thing from a different angle. I'm just saying I'm confused, and you're saying that you don't know. Or you're saying I don't know, and I'm saying I don't know.
I agree with just Sweet Fatigue. He said, I think No Future really just covered it well. It's pretty basic. I mean, it's how the DAO's been operating since the DAO has existed. So we just keep it that way. But yeah, there's going to be like bumps in the road and stuff that we didn't anticipate, and we have to find a way to correct them. The way that we correct them is by going through our process.
Yeah, Z-Bot laid it out perfectly.
It's not on a whim. It's not at the discretion of random DAO members, but the entire DAO, the voting DAO. So I think we could leave it there, guys. If you got anything else, let it be known. We went a little over time, which is cool. But get your votes in, please, for the one live AGIP. I don't think the Pizza DAO one is going to make quorum in time, but there's another one that's live for about 2 weeks. Please get your votes in. And any last words? Anybody here? You guys? Ditchy, No Future, Hardcore, anybody got anything?
No, I think it's good. We know what we have to do. Once we get back from Johnson, we'll go from there. And seems pretty straightforward.
All right.
Yeah, like the Zybot's list there seems to be what you were saying.
Cool.
We're waiting on Johnson to reply what roles we have. Are there roles? And then we can take those roles to the DAO and say, is this correct?
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for coming out, everybody, and see you guys next week.
Take it easy.
Get your votes in. Peace.
Yeah, peace.